We're now standing in the courtyard outside of the Temple Church. Much of the Temple Church was destroyed during World War II, as were the inns, Middle Temple and Inner Temple. I'm here with
Robin Griffith-Jones.
Robin Griffith-Jones. I was going to give you his title.
I insist on giving you my title. It's the Reverend and Valiant Master of the Temple. And you don't have to believe that. You don't believe a word of it, but it's a good title.
I believe every word of it.
Well done. It's a good title.
Today, we're going to go over and discuss what happened during World War II here, because remarkably, while this area looks like nothing occurred from the 1800s, that's not the case.
No, how right you are. Thank heavens. After World War II, the restoration was extremely good. But if you turn your camera around to the right, this whole enormous building facing us had to be built after the war. The old hall was destroyed. You turn slightly further, and the original cloisters were built by Christopher Wren in the 1680s. They were destroyed and had to be rebuilt from scratch. It was a sort of desert, really, by the end of the war. And then if you turn around further, the miracle is that the church was hit by a bomb and it was gutted, but it was not actually destroyed. This column was built in 2000 to celebrate the millennium, but you'll see that the column is modeled on the columns inside the church. Right. The statue on top is two knights on one horse, and that is a genuine medieval Templar symbol. Two knights on one horse. Nobody quite knows why it was one of their symbols. Generally thought perhaps because initially they were very poor, they became very wealthy, but initially they were short of horses. But it's gorgeous to have it, and it went up in 2000, and you'll see it effectively faces Jerusalem, it's facing east. And then if we turn to the left, we see the outside of the round church, which is from 1160. Here we have our round-topped, quite small, round-topped windows in thick walls. This is classic 12th century stuff. I mustn't mislead you, it's been repaired, but it's architecturally exactly as it was in 1162. We move into a world of enormous windows, masses of light. We've gone through 80 years of change.
And this probably gets into a little bit of the popular stuff. What everybody's going to want to know, and I've, of course, walked through Inner Temple and Middle Temple, is, was this the inspiration for Harry Potter and Hogwarts?
No, I don't think it was exactly the inspiration, but Middle Temple Hall was one of the buildings used in the film of Harry Potter. There is no building like the church in Harry Potter. The building that the film used is hall. Wonderful 16th medieval, huge medieval hall. This hall was destroyed also on the 10th of May 1941 when we were hit. Inner Temple Hall had to be rebuilt, the cloisters had to be rebuilt. As we go through, we reach, it's rather a charming little courtyard, some of which was destroyed and some of which was not. But actually you'll see that most of it on our left is new and post-war, and on the right and ahead of us is 17th century. So it was all very, very well repaired after the war. And if you turn the camera very slightly to the right, you will see that we're passing windows that are painted a sort of off-white cream color. And now, as we come to the next building, they're dead white. And the reason is that Inner Temple paints its windows in cream, and Middle Temple paints its windows in white.
And to be clear, this area is still used by lawyers.
Yeah, absolutely. We are entirely surrounded by attorneys' chambers, and in this country, the litigating attorney, called a barrister, is not part of a large firm. She or he is an independent practitioner, but they club together in what we call chambers. That is, cooperatives of self-employed, independent barristers. And effectively, all of these buildings are the chambers of barristers. And they've been here for 600 years.
And to become a barrister, you have to...
Chances are now you read law at university, and then you join one of our 4 inns of court. We have Inner and Middle Temple, which are our 2 inns of court, and there's Lincoln's Inn and Gray's Inn, and you have to join one of these inns of court which have an educational and supervisory and disciplinary role now. It's the generation of good collegiate life, and very, very senior judges and very junior young barristers meet here as they never would otherwise. The Lord Chief Justice and a junior barrister, they're not going to meet except here, where they do meet, because they come to drinks together and they have dinner together. We're looking now at Middle Temple Hall, which was built in the 16th century. The Tower is later. This just escaped the Blitz. An aerial bomb exploded just outside that wall and blew the wall in. But thank heavens, nothing caught fire. They had to repair the screen, but yes, it survived. It's this wonderful 16th century roof. It's extraordinary. They can't open it to the public because they're using it all the time as a collegiate building. I mean, there are lectures, dinners, lunches, talks, training sessions. It's non-stop.
It's magnificent.
But it's a wonderful building. So after the war, and you can see all of this is new, that there is the shell of the church, and there is Middle Temple Hall. And they're two of the great buildings of London, and now all of 100 yards from each other. So what we have here is the ancient shell, and then inside, a huge amount of work had to be done of repair, but it was very famous, and it had been photographed endlessly, and there were prints and drawings of it. So when it was repaired after the war, they just rebuilt it inch by inch.
So did the roof survive?
The roof up the top there was burnt out. The vault inside, the ceiling survived, amazingly. How about that? That's rather extraordinary.
Did the roof of the round church?
No, that fell down. The bomb landed on the far end, on this side, and it swept westwards over this roof and then leapt onto the roof of the round and brought that roof down. That is pre-war on the left, and it's post-war on the right. About half the temple was destroyed, I should think. It was rebuilt beautifully, as you can see.
So why don't we go inside the
Shall we do that?
church?
Yeah.
So the stonework stayed up through the entire...
The stonework stayed up. It's been refaced. Last repair was about 15 years ago when I was here, because in London, stone endlessly needs to be refaced and repointed.
It does in New York too.
If we go into the centre and then turn right, the incendiary landed effectively above the present pulpit, and it swept this way, and it burnt out the roof above this vault, it burnt out the organ, it burnt out all of the pews. All of these columns cracked in the heat, but the vault, the roof, the ceiling stayed up.
How much of the glass was lost?
All the pre-war glass. At that end was lost. At this end, you'll see some did survive, because at this end, the roof came down in the middle, but the stone ceilings around were unaffected. The fire at this end was in the middle. Some of the remaining glass is 19th century. It's not old, but it's 19th century. All of this is war damage. The inns really thought of throwing these things away after the war. The damage was so bad, but a wonderful architect called Walter Godfrey spent months putting them together as best he could. There is a very full photographic record, so he sort of managed to recover a bit. So thank heavens they did not throw them away. That would have been a tragedy. It's a sad thought. For 800 years nearly, they were gorgeous, really gorgeous. And then in one night, they were reduced to this.
Of course, we don't know if the church or the inns were targeted.
No, there was no particular targeting. It's quite easy to bomb London. In those days, you chose, ideally, a night when the tide in the river was low, so there was no pressure in the water pumps to put the fires out. But when there was a fullish moon, so you could see the river, and you then just flew along the river one side or the other, dropping your bombs. And you would either hit Westminster Abbey or you would hit the docks, and it didn't matter which. So night after night for 9 months, the bombers flew over and they simply dropped their bombs along the river, which is why if you travel around the Riverside in London, on both sides, north and south, there are whole areas which have patently had to be rebuilt from scratch.
So all the pews,
These are new. The columns were new. Do you see they're crooked? They'd always been crooked as far as we could know. I mean, they've been crooked for centuries, so the inns had to decide whether to rebuild them vertical or crooked. They had settled like this centuries ago, so they rebuilt them crooked. The organ is second-hand but new here, and the windows are new. But the actual architecture, the shape of the columns, the capitals, is exactly as was in 1240.
So where in the world did you find an organ to replace?
Well, that is a very, very good question. It was the happiest of all chances. There were no organs in London in 1950, but we had a very famous organist called George Thorburn, who before the war had played every organ in Britain. And on a June afternoon in 1950, Thorburn met Lord Glentanagh of Glentanagh Castle in Scotland on Cambridge Station. And he asked his lordship, "How is the organ at Glentanagh?" And his lordship replied, "Very disappointing, no one plays it now. Do you know someone who would like it?" And he gave it to us. It was a gift. What a present. I mean, what a present. A huge, romantic English instrument. It's one of the great instruments of London.
And how did you get it here?
They created a train, a special train, because some of these pipes are 32 feet long, and a train brought it from the Highlands of Scotland down to London. Actually, when it first got here, because it had been made for a highly upholstered ballroom, and it was now in a stone box, it was far too loud, apparently, before my day. It was far too loud. Although everybody admired it, nobody actually liked it, because it sounded like a sort of brass band. It was impossible to listen to. And then 10 years ago, when we had to clean it, our organist and the organ builders, they arranged to revoice the whole thing so that it was suited to this building. From being, frankly, something of a it turned into an extremely sweet-sounding and lovely instrument. And there were reviews of it from people who said they'd always absolutely hated this organ because it sounded too brassy and brash and loud.
It's absolutely wonderful.
It is, and it really is. And we have a fabulous organist called Charlie Andrews who knows exactly how to extract every possible sound out of it.
Oh, it's magnificent. I mean, the whole church is magnificent. So how long did the restoration take?
They started when the war was over, and this end was finished in 1955, 54, 55, and that end in 1958. In both occasions, the late Queen came to rededicate it because it belongs to her, or belongs to her son now, to the King. It was beautifully done, as you can see. It was a major, major operation.
Who paid for that?
It was a mixture. There was a thing called the War Repairs Commission, which was very generous and was helping everybody in London rebuild. But in fact, part of the help came from your own society, the American Bar Association. The ABA's members put together over $40,000, which in 1950, that's a very generous gift. And they gave it to the repair of the church. Well, we have not forgotten that.
So that window up front, obviously that was one of the worst damaged.
The new window is a gift to us. It was given to us by the Glaziers Company in the City of London, and it was made by a very famous glazier called Carl Edwards. He made this sort of gorgeous, slightly retro, slightly old-fashioned window. I mean, if you didn't look closely at it, you could almost for a moment think it was medieval until you actually look at the images in it. Carl Edwards was famous for having an enormous collection of glass fragments from medieval churches which had been hit by the Blitz, particularly blues and reds, because the Middle Ages knew how to create colours, rich blues and reds, which have long since been lost. We can't do it anymore. So he would collect these fragments and incorporate them into his windows. So that window is indeed from the 1950s, but actually there are endless fragments in it from the Middle Ages which have this very, very rich colouring. At different times of day, it looks blazing red, and it's all to do with the angle at which every single piece of glass is placed so as either to reflect or refract the sunlight. And it means that at different times of day, it has quite different colouring. It's most extraordinary.
It's absolutely beautiful.
And you can see, if you look at the central panels, halfway up on the left-hand side, he has shown St. Paul's Cathedral with the flames around it in the Blitz. And on the right-hand side, there is the Temple Church.
It is absolutely beautiful.
And then if you turn the camera, you'll see in 2008, we put in a new window, and it rather weirdly looks like a more modern version of the east window.
1608 to 2000?
2008, that's because it was the 400th anniversary of our Royal Charter. The reason for its looking so similar in style and colour is that the new window was made by Caroline Benyon, who was the daughter of Carl Edwards of the East Window and was brought up in her father's studio, so she knew exactly how to do it.
And what are the side windows next to that?
They are little fragments of 19th century glass which survived, and actually good enough. The inn's just decided, well, don't throw them away. I mean, that's just silly. It creates some continuity and some colour.
The church is restored beautiful. I mean, a lot of the cathedrals that are super ornate, but it just speaks to you.
I adore the Abbey, and I take groups from here around the Abbey every year. They are so large. They're rather overwhelming. This is very beautiful, but it's not overwhelming.
I'm thinking of Notre Dame and Lynn.
Oh, yes, it was.
And
exactly.
you compare it to that, and this is on a totally different scale, but it has a feel that just draws you in. It's just magnificent. There's no other word for it. I hope you enjoyed your time with us, going through Temple Church and around the Inns of Court. We'll be back in 2026 to see Robin again. What we saw there was absolutely amazing. We're lucky we get to travel around the world. A few places are as exciting as visiting Temple Church or the area around that. And it's fully accessible. It's in the middle of London. So if you're looking for a place to go, we highly recommend you visit London. And while you're there, stop by Temple Church. And if you're lucky, maybe you'll get a chance to hear the choir sing and hear that beautiful organ play. I'm Jack Rose, Ultimate Park Guide. Ring the bell, subscribe, and see where we're going next.